And there's a copy of that here today. Harris is going to talk about the building assessment in a moment. And that really deals with the quantifiable parts of the study. You know, how is the building doing physically? What's falling apart? What's in good shape? What needs attention? What doesn't? And then the more qualitative part was the part that got stalled, and that's what we're kicking off today. That's the engagement sessions where we listen to you as a community and establish goals for the planning study that will look to the next 25 years or so of this facility and try to determine where the greatest needs are. And as designers, we will then synthesize the information that we gather working with you and with the committee to propose a series of design interventions that would take place over the next couple of years to address the concerns that come up today. And I think probably all of this is done in the context of you know, a world that's changed a lot in the last 3 years, and an understanding that one key to preservation is change. And so we hope to hear today in the breakout sessions more of your input on what's working well and what's not working, and understand that this is a facility that has changed many times over the last 100+ years, and that this is the time for, you know, to get all of your input as to, you know, what works really well here and maybe what doesn't. I'm going to hand it off to Harris, who's going to take us through a summary of what we learned in that first building assessment phase, and then we're going to talk about what we'll be doing in the breakout sessions.
Great. Can everyone see the screen over there to your right? Super. All right, we'll move quickly through the agenda for the day, and as Jules mentioned, just a very brief recap of the facilities assessment report, which we did in 2020. We won't go through it in great detail, but if folks are interested, I'm sure we can make a copy available. We do have one hard copy with us, so if anyone wants to come peruse it later, you're welcome to, and there may be others floating around as well. You don't see any slides? Huh. Can you move the mic closer? Can you move the slide? Sure, yeah. Is that better? Okay. So no one's seeing a blue slide on the screen? Okay.
Well, when the slides come up, you'll see a picture of our office. Is that shown yet? We're just really briefly, who is DIGSAU? We're an architecture firm located at 12th and Callow Hill. We're about 45 people. Our work is mostly in cities. We work for all types of clients, but really the work that energizes our practice is work that asks really hard questions, difficult problems that really require the most out of design. There are some slides when they come up of some of the projects around town that you might recognize. And then the second slide that will come up will show some of our work with existing buildings. And I think that's an important thing to just touch on briefly, our experience. Some notable projects recently include the Kelly Writers House at Penn, which was a Sam Sloan Victorian house, mid-19th century. That project involved a modest expansion and a serious technology upgrade so that facility, which broadcasts poetry readings and concerts and things like that internationally, was able to really adapt a 150-plus-year-old structure into one that could really be a high-tech international performance virtual venue. Similarly, Jamie, who's with us here tonight, is just completing the renovation adaptation of the old Barnes Gallery in Marion on St. Joseph University's campus. That will be reopening in May as the Francis McGuire Museum. That's St. Joe's University has a I believe, 100-year lease on that property. And so that project, too, involves modernization of a very beloved Paul Cray building. Similarly, we're doing a lot of work here in the city for Parks and Rec. We're redoing the Carousel House in the Centennial District, which is either loved or hated building, depending on where you stand on that issue. But accessibility is of paramount concern there. And also in West Philly, we're doing an adaptive reuse and renovation to the Francis Myers Recreation Center, which is a 1880s orphanage that's on 58th and King Sessing in West Philadelphia. So adapting, modernizing, and preserving existing beloved structures is a big part of what we do.
Perhaps we'll just describe the process. So the folks at home, they're not here, but they can see the slides. I don't think it's so important that you actually see, but we'll just describe where we are in the process. And if the slides come up, great, but I think you'll be able to comprehend what we're discussing without the visuals. All right. Well, thanks, Reverend Abbey. These are some of the projects that Jules was just describing. So in terms of where we are in the process, as Jules mentioned, we are in the discovery phase. It's a little bit more prolonged than we typically do, but we looked at the building in 2020, and today we're starting our conversation with you, the users of the building, about how you use the various spaces. So we're in the discovery phase, the orange phase on the left there, and we'll move into what we call concept design, sketches and analyses and diagrams of what the building might become. And that's something we'll be doing over the next few months. And then towards the end of the summer, or I suppose when the congregation is back from summer break, there'll be a report issued that will lay forth the concepts. This is just a schedule version that describes exactly what I just said. We're in the orange phase, the red line, picking up steam and excited to go. Again, this is the assessment report that was issued in 2020. We have a hard copy. Just to give you a very high level of a few topics we analyzed, we looked at what we call program. When architects say program, what they really mean is what uses or functions are happening and the areas that are dedicated to those. So by floor plan, you see some pink, which is public gathering space. Some green is indicating offices and daycares. Pink is also Griffin Hall in the basement. And I think one of the points of the conversation today is how might these colors change, or how might they blend or mix today or over time. I think one topic that we've heard again and again that is really high priority is accessibility. There are multiple definitions of accessibility, but in the most literal sense, it's physical accessibility for those who are mobility impaired. The green is indicating what is either accessible today or could be made accessible with minor repairs or renovations, things like small ramps. So it's, as we can see, it's a pretty limited portion. It's the room we're in and a few other spaces, the parish room, the chapel, once you get up into this space. Obviously, all the spaces above the second floor, third floor, because there's no elevator, I think all of you or most of you would know, those spaces are not accessible. So that's something we'll want to tease out more in our conversations today. The historical aspects of the project, we do have a historical preservation expert on the team. They are architects, and they're not here today, but they were part of the report, and they will be part of the concept studies moving forward. They're a local firm called Friends and Friends, and they really did some great archival research and also identified elements, components, portions of the building that are really worth preserving and or restoring. But I think the message that we all came to see upon this close study was that this is a living building. This has been a living building since the first blocks were laid in 1894. The picture in the upper left there is what the building looked like in the 1890s. You'll notice to the right a porte cochere, a carriage porch, and a tower, which is no longer there. that was actually removed about 20 years later. There were some major renovations actually above us. These panels opened up at some point, and there was a skylight added in the early 1900s. The parish house was very significantly reconfigured with stairs, a new entry multiple times, and in 1957, this is sort of strange from what architects see, the basement was added. Usually you start with the basement, but that was dug out and added later. So again, I just really want to emphasize that this building has evolved significantly over the course of its life to meet the needs of the congregation and all the community and all the users. So that's the point of today, is to see how and if that might continue. The structural assessment, I'll leave it to the structural engineers to go into great detail, but generally it's fair to say that given the age of the building, kudos to the congregation because of the maintenance that was done over the years. It's really a fairly clean bill of health. There are some minor structural renovations. These are pretty innovative hammer beams, they're called. They're actually medieval style, and they're kind of a riff on that. And you can see some posts over here under the organ loft, and there's some impact to structure below. There have been some ongoing masonry repairs. It's a beautiful masonry exterior that have happened over the past 20 years. And there's some ongoing repairs that should be made to the roof. But again, I think it's safe to say that the bones are good, they're minor repairs, and that's good. That's great news. Building systems, similarly, I'll leave it to the mechanical and the electrical and the plumbing engineers to go into great detail, or you can read the book. But of course, there are things that were installed many years ago that need updating, bringing up to code. Nick, who's the super of the building, and others, that team has done a lot over the past several years, so there's a lot to be proud of there. A lot of repairs and upgrades are in process. However, another point of this conversation is so those things don't happen in a piecemeal fashion, right? You don't want to install sprinklers in one room and then realize you want to reconfigure the room, rip them out, and have to reinstall them. So the idea of a vision plan is to have a comprehensive attitude. These are the recommendations we made in 2020. So this is the 16 top 16 high priority list, and it's good news that about 70% of those items have been completed or are currently in progress. So things like repairing the parish house chimney, which was in significant disrepair, some stucco work, some electrical work, things like steam condensate coolers, very sort of the nitty gritty, but essential to make the building work. And this is a 67-item, the comprehensive list, the laundry list, again, that Nick and the team really put a lot of effort into during COVID, and we're almost at 50% of those items. So again, a lot to be proud of. And this is just recapping some topics that we heard both from the visioning committee, so from Luana and all the folks that she introduced, from the reverends in our conversations in 2020. We expect these topics to come up again today. Some of them were embedded in the questionnaires that you received and many of you filled out. I won't go through all the sort of observations, but just list the topics: accessibility, sustainability, which can be defined in many different ways, light, both natural light and artificial light, aesthetic representation of theology, which is an interesting one, enhanced usability, of course, and of course, ongoing repairs and building systems work and preservation. Okay, so questionnaire results. I don't believe these were shared out, and I think these questionnaires may still be open, so if you haven't responded, we'd encourage you to go ahead and do so. I'll just run through maybe 4 or 5 slides. It's not a comprehensive summary of the results, but just a few that related specifically to the architecture, which we found interesting. To the question, what areas of the church does your household use? And there were a number of activities listed. I thought it was interesting that the porch and the chapel and the upstairs classrooms, at least from the respondents, were all used equally. And then, of course, the sanctuary is used the most, and then the parish room. I know there were a lot of comments about the porch being used more, if possible. And then just, again, I won't read all of these, but I'll just call out a few keywords. Folks in the questionnaire were asked to list some qualities of some of the main spaces in the church, both positive and negative. So for the porch, some folks said dark and cluttered and cramped, sometimes collects unsightly things. Storage could be better integrated. Some folks had comments about lighting and accessibility. There is a ramp, though, so accessibility has been at least maybe temporarily improved. And then some folks said it's sheltered and convenient, good for special events. This is a very architectural observation. Someone noted a sense of compression, a small space before you come into this grand space, which is great, yeah. Yeah, exactly, the whole idea. Frank Furness knew what he was doing. And someone said it has the furnace feel. So Frank Furness, the architect, and his father was the first settled minister of this church. The sanctuary, some concerns include accessibility, acoustics, this system, the PA system, hybrid technology, lighting, the Christian iconography, the pews, and HVAC, so heating and cooling in winter and summer. People love the high ceilings, the stained glass, the windows. They find the space inspiring. Someone noted a relatively good sound system, so I guess it's up for opinion. Someone said excellent acoustics, yeah. The parish room, acoustics were noted as poor, and then sound can bleed easily to and from the chapel. Cramped in the summer. Maybe there's certain activities that only happen in the summer. Windows, no paging system, maybe more comfortable chairs. And then, but it is accessible. It does have air conditioning. It's pleasant light and size and proportion. Good rental space. Intimate gatherings can happen, but it's also big and airy. The chapel seemed quite divided. Some folks also noted it was very dark and noisy and underused, and there were maybe some accessibility issues with clearances, but many people said it was their favorite space in the building, contemplative, intimate, private, and should be used more, comfy, lovely. And the upstairs classrooms, I know a lot of you might not use those all the time or ever, but some questions about accessibility, windows, bathrooms, just comfort, general thermal comfort, things like egress. Someone noticed some very specific fire escape issues, which is great. And then others noted nice ambiance and natural light, and it's a source of income via rentals. So someone said, I defer to the users of that space to keep the renters and tenants happy. And this was an interesting one. I'll just point out the last bullet point under the positive is the kind of thinking we'd encourage folks to do today. Someone said, consider space for a youth lounge or hangout space. That's just kind of thinking about how we might use the spaces differently. All right, so again, we'll leave a copy of these slides so that they can be distributed. We'll have a hard copy of the book if anyone wants to take a look. I think before we open it up for questions, I will open it up just if there are any clarifying questions. Just to paint a picture of the day, we're going to get into groups. I think we're going to get into 4 in-person groups, and I believe 2 of us are going to be in here, and maybe 2 are going to be in the parish room. Is that right? We'll figure out where we're going. And we're going to ask you some questions based on the program. And remember, architects call uses program. So if you can see the screen there, we, with the visioning committee, identified 6 categories of program. And there's a catch in that number 6 is a wild card, so it could be anything. So really 5 current uses, which are worship, childcare and religious education, adult programming, which spans a number of things, education, meetings, membership, caring, music and performance, and community outreach. So we'd encourage folks to really just reflect on the 3 questions at the bottom of this slide, which are also, we're going to have posters up on easels to remind you. Folks are going to reflect, make comments on Post-it notes, and put them on the boards, and we'll have really just a mind map, a collective mind map of everyone's thoughts, and it'll really help the design team get a sense of which areas, which programs are of greatest concern to the users here today. And then just to rest easy in that there may be groups here that are not represented today, right? We don't, if there's, I don't know, if no one is here from daycare, we'll of course make sure we speak to those people during this engagement process this month. So that's what we'll be doing for about the next 40 minutes with, you'll be teamed up with one person from DIGSAU and then hopefully 1 or 2 people from the visioning committee. And then we'll come back, we'll reflect back. And the Zoom folks, by the way, if you're on Zoom, you'll be meeting with me. And then we'll come back and share out what we've come to. Any general questions? Yes?
Can this report be made available for the weekend so that we can read it at home? Or put it on the website, the full report? This one? Yeah.
Sure.
The slideshow just shown with the question. We said it's a long report.
Yeah, there's a long report. Yeah.
The full assessment. We have 2 copies in the house.
Okay.
But there's, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Great. The question was about whether the report could be shared, the one that was done in 2020, and I think we established we have several hard copies, and a PDF file will be shared via a newsletter or something similar. I did not, so I think we'll just have to count out and divvy up. Yeah. Any other high-level questions before we break out? Great. All right. Hi. Yes.
Yes, Julie just joined us. So Julie, Ethan, Jamie, Jules, and Harris.
Checking out the chapel to see if it's really available for
I think we're going to do this just like in primary school, where maybe we'll start up here and work our way over and just call out 1 through 4. So we're going to get into 4 in-person groups. And again, Zoom folks, hang tight. I'm going to move to a more private space where I can talk to you. Okay. Wait.
1,
Great.
2, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Remember your number.
3, 4. 3, 4.
We'll have one of the groups in the chapel.
Okay.
One in the mayor's room.
Okay, well, great. Awesome. Thanks.
We can probably start grabbing our stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Huh.
All right, so we have one at the back of the sanctuary. There are chairs back there. I will do so. Am I? Okay, great. So we'll have a group at the back. Number 1 group. Thank you very much. We will have number 2 group in the front up here, and we'll need to haul some chairs back to front. I'm not sure, I didn't keep count of how many that might make in a group, but I'm thinking it's at least 10. So group number 3 will go into the parish room, group number 4 into the chapel.
While we're waiting for Harris, I would just tell everyone that just see if you can unmute yourselves when you want to speak. And Kate, are you our committee person?
No, I'm actually not. I am a
Oh, you're not.
participant. Yeah.
Oh. Deb, you're our committee person? No. Okay.
Well, I'll speak up for a second. I'm Mariana, and I am on the committee, but I've been kind of out of it since I've had COVID this week and last. I will do the best I can.
Okay. That's okay. We'll have Harris too.
Yes.
Can we take Harris's slide off the screen so we can see each other?
Oh, sure. Hold on.
Thank you.
Does that do it?
Nope.
If you, no. You might have to hit your gallery view. If you haven't done that, does that? No.
I had it for one moment, but then it disappeared again. The slide's still there.
Gallery worked.
Is everyone else just seeing Mike's, Harris's screen?
Yes,
Yeah.
I think it's because the host, when he left Harris, he didn't stop his screen share or slideshow or whatever.
I mean, I can see some of the boxes of people, but it's mostly staring at the screen. I don't know if we need to do that. Maybe he wants us to.
No, I think
I'm sure he'll address it when he gets back.
Oh,
I'm sure
right,
he will.
Yeah. So right now we're Hollywood Squares.
right.
How's everybody?
It's encouraging.
Yeah,
good, Zamoria. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Excellent.
Mm-hmm.
Happy spring.
Yes,
How are you doing, Mariana, since you've been sick? How are you feeling?
yes.
Very impatient. Let me introduce myself because I have had a long association, not as a parishioner, but as an architect with First Unitarian since about 1990, I guess,
Oh,
overseeing some of the small repairs and some of the not so small, the masonry repairs, the rebuilding of chimneys and things like that through the years. So I have a certain amount of collective memory and a lack of insight about all the programs that go on, but I have some familiarity with the building. So that gives me a unique perspective since I've been around longer than most people
Oh,
involved
great.
with this project, for this church, except for some of the parishioners.
Okay, that's great to know.
We're really lucky to have you today.
Yeah,
Thank you.
but hope you'll be feeling like yourself real soon though.
Tomorrow. That would be soon enough.
Okay,
Mariana,
you didn't have to
what
go
is-
to the hospital for it, did you?
No,
Okay.
Mariana, what is the difficulty in putting the elevator in that you've seen?
we did a couple of studies and I honestly haven't looked at those drawings for a long time.
Mhm.
If we try to make it serve all the different floors, including the landing where all the offices are, I think that it's challenging, but my sense was that we looked at one location that was sort of within the building, more or less where the first floor restroom is, and one that was in what's now the Memorial Garden outside the volume of the existing building. And complicated, but probably doable some way or another.
Mhm.
And so I'm sure that looking at it.
All right, testing. Patrick, are you hearing anything right now? Should be hearing stuff on the A bus. Anything, pal? Well, everyone on Zoom, we may have some trouble getting you into the sanctuary, but Otherwise, if you need to say anything, put it in the chat and we'll bring it a cruise that way.
Made. So we mostly ended up focusing on this room here, this kind of like, and different ways we could go about using it. I think one of the major, very interesting conversations we had was, do we need to have pews in here? And if that were to be changed, kind of knock-on effects from that. So currently the pews are bolted down, and they kind of, in a way, restrict the ability of this space to be used for a variety of different like concerts or things like that. So if we were to change that and potentially either bring in a different type of seating or make these more flexible that they could be pushed up against a wall or taken out of this space, what would that entail? That also would address certain concerns of accessibility. Right now, one of the issues with these pews is that it's very hard if you're handicapped or differently bodied to like be able to get in and out of this space easily, especially if you would need to block the aisles for different cases. And if you could move them, this would be easier to use for like big concerts, and you wouldn't have to just sit in the pews, which might increase ability to rent this out to get more funding for other visionary ideas. So that was one of the really big conversations we had. I really wanted to try to capture that. Also, in this particular space, a major concern of people in our group was the heavy Christian iconography in this room and how certain members of the congregation may be made uncomfortable by that, given certain histories. So specifically, one thing that came up was the crosses on the chairs up there, and if those would be a really easy thing to change. Question of if we want to, or if we wanted to potentially like add more art or add other symbolism in this room. Another major concern with this room was the coloring. With the rooms right now is blue and red, which are very, just very bold choices for the coloring here. Yeah, we heard it may there's something about it might not be. We're not sure. I'm not. Yeah. 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 So, a big conversation of making potentially adding green to make it more natural. Try to add one really neat idea was a mural on the back wall for represent like social justice or issues like that. I think just changing the colors could be very, very easy and very interesting to really recontextualize this space. So that was sort of major conversations. Another long conversation we had was about the basement. Presently, apparently the concert venue and promoters, if they have a handicapped person, they physically carry them down the stairs, and that is the accessibility of that Griffith Hall is being done. So obviously an elevator for the whole building would fix those concerns, or potentially just a wheelchair lift. And really trying to just get down there more. And also how we're using the basement was a very big topic of discussion. Right now we have a very large kitchen, and Griffith Hall is directly attached to it, but one person in our group didn't even realize we had a kitchen until we told them, so clearly that space isn't being very heavily utilized. So we kind of felt that kitchen could become like a central point and potentially even like a new category of event. So I discussed with one of the Reverend Hannah about like we could feed the homeless down there, or some kind of events like that, of really focusing around food and like engaging with either the community or just different groups in that way of like giving this large kitchen space. And that would really kind of really give us the ability to do different kind of events if we just kind of use the kitchen more. Am I good? Yeah, maybe just yeah, just other concerns, just outdoor space here, just potentially make it a little bit easier to get around. But those were kind of the major events. Yeah, I think that was kind of like the large part of our discussion. It was a very long discussion. I think there was a lot of good ideas, and I believe our board's going to be captured for kind of, you know, posterity. And I'm trying to see. We were asked about how much we would be willing to change on a scale from 0 to 10, and, you know, 0 would be like no changes, and 10 is very willing. And we averaged out to about a 6, so a pretty strong willingness to change, and, you know, kind of split like between a few people who were kind of focused on keeping things very historical, and then a lot of people who were very, very eager for, you know, lots of change. And I think that really captures like a very good sentiment. I think we're very excited about the future. Cool.
And yes, we will be documenting these, taking photos. We can share those out. They are useful for us as well moving forward. So we will have a snapshot of all of these. I know this group maybe didn't write everything down, but we'll make sure we get the notes from this group here. Oh, Joe, are you ready to present? You can. All right, wonderful, great. Great.
Similarly,
Joe. Oh, sorry. Yeah. So the Zoom folks.
we talked mostly about the sanctuary area, and we also talked about the use of the space, possibly moving the pews to different orientations, so it could be more flexible. But also we talked a lot about the music element, the music element of how the church music program, both in the services, but also for concerts, for the use downstairs. The whole music program of the church has blossomed, it seems to me, in the last, I don't know, 20 years or so. Like Rick was mentioning, when he came, the choir was small enough that they were up there in the loft. And the organ was up there, and they played the organ and sang, but now there's no way the choir could fit up there, so that's why they're down here. We also then moved to the problem of the band needing to be able to function, and with chords, and there's not a dedicated space for the band, so the whole issue about how the music can function here needs to be kind of rethought, and especially probably to be both dedicated, like so you don't have chords running all over the place, but also so you could have flexibility to move different formations, different forms of music. So we spent a lot of time talking about that, including whether or not the lectern up here should stay or should be made more movable, because sometimes it's in the way for arranging that space. So that was another issue, and that also touched on the sort of iconography, you know, like, do we need a lectern? Does it come from this earlier era of how the church was designed and used, and should that change or not? Okay. I think from that, we moved to HVAC, you know, like how is the space used, and how can it be used now, and how is it like so difficult to use? Like, for example, there's no air conditioning in the summer. We can't be here, but also using the Griffin Hall downstairs for the concerts, they can't use it in the summer either, because it's just way too hot with all the people jumping around in a rock concert. So I think the improvement of the HVAC would go a long way to make things like that more usable, make spaces more usable, but let alone in the wintertime when the HVAC is so uneven. Like, do we have to turn all the heat on to heat the whole place just when the offices are used, or when the school is in session? Like, the distribution of heat is problematic. So I think there's a lot. We talked a lot about how that needs to be rethought and reworked. We also touched on similar to the first group, the access to the outdoor spaces, such as they they're small to begin with, and the access is really difficult. So to make it feel more like a, quotes, green space here, we don't have many. Even the outdoor spaces are kind of paved over, except for the the alley of trees here, but at least to have some better access would, I think, would help. Oh, and let alone the pews are uncomfortable, right? We know that. Okay. The religious Christian iconography issue came up with us as well. I think we don't need to, we know that's an ongoing discussion. And then we also talked about, well, I guess you could say the iconography in the windows then led us to like, well, there's all this stained glass. It's hard, it gets dark in here unless you turn the lights on. You can't see the glass. You know, all the issues of the distribution of light in here is really something that needs to be thought through and addressed. And then we had a really interesting a little talk on, do we have spaces that are optimized for gathering? Like how do we gather here? Do we use the porch? Do we use the sanctuary? Do we use the parish house? The small gatherings, large gatherings, so just think about how the spaces, the various spaces we have could be better organized for different forms of group use. Okay, accessibility, we mentioned, of course, accessibility. Storage problems in the church, there seems to be a lack of storage for any number of things, and then some of the storage is kind of not well organized. The whole sense of rethinking what storage we have here, who uses it, how could it be better organized seems important. We also then talked about, similar to the previous discussion about the kitchen, the use of the downstairs, how could we better serve people like homeless population, feeding people, if we made use of those spaces and reorganized them. And there was even some history that apparently at one time we were housing homeless people in the basement. Is that? Overnight, possibly. That was some time ago, but, interesting to think about that. Yeah. Anyway, I think that's everything I wrote down.
Thanks, Joe. All right, how about, it was Jacob from the parish room group?
Hello, I'm Jacob from Group 3. I'm going to try and summarize this quickly, so apologies to people in Group 3 if particular things are not addressed. With respect to worship, I'm going to try and stay close without popping my peas. Where can I go here? With respect to worship, we discussed the reality that some people are willing to have total change to this space to better serve comfort and accessibility, and others want total preservation of existing aesthetics and ambiance. There is no consensus. Everyone emphasized accessibility, both in terms of wheelchair access and in terms of sound in the space that many people can't hear was mentioned. Better sound just generally. The question of pews came up, both their comfort and their static nature. It was pointed out that for church services anyway, these pews have never really been filled, and that perhaps fewer of them could still serve our purposes, and then that would free up space. Exterior use of the building. We discussed the possibility of drawing people into the sanctuary various ways, by making the porch more inviting, by making perhaps a garden space that was open to the public, somehow even broadcasting or at least giving a little taste of church services outside on the porch. Like, could people come by and hear a little bit of the sound of the church service? I mean, that can only happen now when the doors are open, but are there other possibilities? Childcare and religious education. The question of a dedicated space for religious education came up. We got it on good authority that the experience is the same as going into a preschool, because it is a preschool space, right? Especially for older children, that seems maybe like an issue, and maybe not children at all, I'm talking about adolescents. It's difficult to move children from the spaces on the 3rd floor to the exterior outside space. For spaces outside the sanctuary, I think the questions we had revolved around dedicated spaces versus multi-use space. Could there be more comfortable spaces for small meetings that didn't have echoey sound, that were more intimate and inviting? Could there be a place on the 1st floor for individual meetings with ministers that felt intimate and confidential? We discussed the kitchen. I don't think we came to any conclusions. We talked about how it seemed like you could go all in on having a kitchen that is probably going to have to be inspected by the city and all that, and there, in that way, allow for events like weddings and other things where food would be prepared here, which would give the potential for more income, but would also be a significant cost to us. Related, we discussed a food pantry. Could we just go down to a dry goods storage? Could we have a food pantry on the 1st floor so that people who need that food could be invited in and quickly get what they need, and stay, of course, if they want, or be on their way if they want? We discussed how, and I think Carol said something to the effect that we are known as the place, and this has already been mentioned, that puts on the punk and hardcore shows in the basement, but can we also be known as a place where the needy are served, where whether you're a member of this church or not, you can come for help? And we discussed so much else, but I think I'd better leave it there in the interest of time.
Thanks, Jacob. Great. All right, the last in-person group, I guess it was group 4. Come on up. And I'll do a quick Zoom recap as well for the Zoom group.
Hi, everybody. I didn't write anything down, but I think we spent plenty of time talking. Some of the things that we'd like to keep are things like our location, obviously. Things like, I'm so sorry. I need to refresh my brain just for a moment.
You can move the mic over to that.
Oh, crap. Things we keep, our location, our beautiful and historic space, things that we'd like to do better. AC was mentioned. Our sense of hospitality, redoing our kitchenette, putting in gender-neutral restrooms on the 1st floor, separating the kitchenette from the alley space so kids don't have to walk by hot coffee pots on their way to the playground. You know? Other things we thought about, things like changing the wagon wheel lighting in this John. It's really something. Sorry. What else did we do? I'm so sorry, I lost my train of thought. Community impacts, things like maybe a space for a clinic, food pantry, soup kitchen. What are ways that we can impact, even if it was just something as putting Sharps containers or Narcan dispensers down below. Things that could make an immediate impact right away. Other things that we talked about, changing our audio visual, updating it for the 21st century instead of piecemealing it. Creating a choir loft, maybe moving these pews and planting a space for the band that was dedicated. Maybe even a place that was raised, so when the choir director's directing people, the parishioners can see them. It'd be something that we could think about. I probably have a lot of things that I am not thinking about because I am being a little self-serving by saying the things that I want to do. Does anyone? Let's be real. Anyone from my space remember something? Daryl, do you have a water fountain? Oh my goodness. Having a place that we could serve something other than hot coffee. Yeah, so we can make income off of it.
Can you repeat it so the Zoom people can hear?
Oh, commercializing the kitchen so we can use it for rentals, so we can use it for serving the homeless, so we can, I mean, we could even use it for ghost kitchens, people that operate food trucks. There's a lot of things we could do to make a huge impact on people's lives that wouldn't do that much more than what we're already doing. A teen space, yes, having a place that's super dedicated. Couches, flat screens, good sound systems, low lighting. Someplace that doesn't feel like it belongs to preschoolers. Because who wants to be a teenager walking into a room where you're learning your ABCs? They already know their ABCs.
Could you read some of the wild cards?
Ooh, wild card stuff. Make Griffin Hall accessible. Sorry, blah, blah, blah. Medical clinic, we saw that. Additional bathrooms. Ooh, that's a really important one. Braille signage in our church. Making our church visually accessible for people with visual impairments. And other languages. That one's nice too, in Espanol. Was there another one over here? Adaptable spaces, making sure that the space can be multifunction, even if it was something as room dividers in the parish hall, so we can have 2 events going on at once. And I think that's pretty good. I could probably go on forever, but let's not.
All right, thanks. Great feedback, a wide range. I'll just highlight a few key points from the Zoom group, things that maybe weren't mentioned previously. Folks brought up sustainable materials, so 2 in particular were for roof repairs, potentially using recycled or upcycled. Basically, it's like a faux slate, which actually the historic preservationist was recommending a product like that. And then someone else mentioned carpet tiles, recycled flooring, so just general sustainable materials. Folks brought up there was a luncheon program here, maybe a long time ago, but I think it's discontinued and it would be difficult to use because of the kitchen, the fact that you have to pass through Griffin Hall or use the stair, which is not accessible. So there were some similar concerns about the kitchen in the basement and the pantry here. The parish room seemed very popular in the summer because it has air conditioning, but due to the growing congregation, there were comfort concerns and use concerns, aesthetic concerns or questions. So just folks were encouraging reconsideration of how to configure the parish room, even if it's just furniture or decor. And then we talked about potentially reconfiguring the ground floor. To just big questions about, does entry work? Does accessibility work? Does circulation work? Is it a little bit confusing if you're coming through the side entry? Some folks ask questions like, could you take a portion of the chapel or this corner of the sanctuary to reconfigure the space? We need more restrooms, right? There's only 1 unisex restroom on this level. There's the strollers take up a lot of space during the weekday. What else? Oh, someone said, could you lift the chapel? Because it's a great space, but would it be better served, if it was lifted and you did meeting spaces? In other words, could you have that same space, but maybe it's in a different part of the building? So we kind of thought pretty expansively. I hope I got everything, Zoom group, but if not, we have the chat too. I think we are just a few minutes after 3. I just want to thank everyone for spending the afternoon with us and giving some really great feedback. This was the first engagement session. We're going to be meeting with some targeted groups during the month of April. And then I think we settled on a date. I think it's April 29th. The time, 10th. Thank you, 10 to 12. come for bagels at 9:30. We'd love to see you there. And the design team, we're going to synthesize what we've heard and come back with neat graphics and diagrams and analyses. And, you know, the conversation is still wide open. So the whole idea is that on the 29th, we won't come with solutions. We're just coming with what we've heard and some synthesis. Did I see any questions? Yep. Really just folks that we didn't hear from. So for the program groups, I think it would make sense to talk with rental folks who are like the daycares, music groups, and we would work with you all about who else makes sense. Do you have any recommendations? Yes, but not right at the moment. Okay.
No one actually representing religious education was here today because they're with
Sure.
kids upstairs right now, so if we can figure out a different way to
Great.
divvy that up.
Great. The comment was religious ed. They are not here, so we should be sure to meet with them. And we'll figure out a way to get, if there are other recommendations, we'll figure out a way to get that information to us so we can talk to them. Yep.
Just to give voice to one addition from the chat, elevators.
Great. Yes. Elevators was it? An elevator, right? We've spoken with Nick a bunch. I know he's not maintenance per se, but yeah, we'd be talking to folks who take care of the building. Yep. Yep.
So Mariana Thomas of the visioning team is, Mariana Thomas of the visioning team is meeting with staff, including maintenance, and we have been gathering information from the child care centers, from, you know, as somebody mentioned, from R5, that's been the longtime host of concerts here. We had a meeting with them. We're meeting with the College of Physicians, which is, of course, not a user of our building, but are now our neighbor on two sides. And so talking about development in the whole area and how it impacts the buildings, theirs and ours. So the visioning team will be meeting with DIGSAU twice, potentially, between this day and the 29th. So it's important for you to also give other thoughts that come to mind, other feedback from this day to members of the visioning team. We don't have a separate address. So you could just send them to communications. Lauren's working very closely with us, and she would forward them or send them to me directly or any other member of the visioning team that you're aware of. So we'll be in conversation with DIGSAU and you know, bring any further thoughts, comments you have to their attention over time. Yeah.
Thanks, Luana. I think we'll leave it there for today. It's been a long afternoon, but maybe just one last round of applause for yourselves, for the visioning team. Thank you. Hope to see you next time.